back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with M3.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
Place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each league.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey man, this time we're gonna do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky. Coming to you today from Freehold, New Jersey, it's time for Keeping It Sports with M3, normally powered by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm, of course, your host, Mike M3 Rosansky, coming to you here on this Monday, the 7th day of the month of July. Hope you're all having a great day. Hope you all had a very fun, safe, and happy 4th of July weekend. Hopefully no one out there blew their hand off shooting off fireworks over this past weekend. If you're watching the podcast live on Facebook, once again, as always, thank you very much. And you may notice I'm doing the podcast from my house today. That's mainly because yours truly physically needs a little bit of a break before the hellacious week I have upcoming, where at Amazon it's going to be Amazon Prime Week. And because of that, I'm going to have to work 6 consecutive days from 6:30 a.m. to 6 o'clock p.m. So I figured give myself a little break, save myself some travel today, and just do the podcast from the comfort of my dining room. Not really excited about what is to come over the next couple weeks, but I'm a grown man and I'll tough it out. The only thing that I dread more these days than the upcoming work schedule I have is watching the New York Yankees play baseball. And quite frankly, these last, 3 weeks it's been, maybe a little bit more since June 13th, have exposed all of the problems with this New York Yankees team. And it's one thing, as we know, over the course of a baseball season, there's peaks and valleys that a team goes through. You're going to have your moments where even the best of teams are playing 500 baseball. Hell, there's teams that get off to slow starts and then all of a sudden May turns and that they hit the ground running. There's teams that get off to fast starts and then they'll have a bit of a dip in May. Well, this is the second year in a row we're seeing from the Yankees where they're having a June spill into July swoon. And it's different this year because last year what was weird about their swoon is you went a full 6 weeks without them winning a series. During this time you've seen them win a couple of series, but it hasn't exactly been very appetizing baseball to watch. It really hasn't been clean, crisp baseball that you would hope for from what was a division-leading team. And that was, as of a week ago today, we were sitting here and the Yankees were leading the American League East by 3 games. Then they go up to Toronto and get swept by the Blue Jays, losing in almost every possible fashion conceivable, other than not losing a game by a walk-off in the bottom of the 9th inning. They thoroughly got beat down by the Toronto Blue Jays. George Springer treated the Yankees pitching staff like it was BP for 4 days, and quite frankly, I hope we don't have to see him again for a while. That's how miserable that 4-game span was. Between that and losing 2 out of 3 over the weekend against the New York Mets, in which the Yankees were fortunate to salvage the Sunday afternoon game. It exposed every flaw, every concern that I have had about the New York Yankees coming into this season. The Yankees never came into this year as a perfect squad. And that's whether they had re-signed Juan Soto or gone on this, what do you want to call it, a spending spree, or dividing the money up and bringing in multiple players. Even with making all the moves they made this offseason, there were problems to be had when it come to this Yankee team. There were things that you looked at and you said, I really don't like how that feels. I really don't jive with the vibe of what goes on with this Yankee team. And now going 7-16 since June 13th. Ironically, their slide began with a Friday the 13th. Going 7-16 in that span has exposed everything that is wrong with this Yankee team. I may sound like a broken record continuously bringing this up, but if you listen to this podcast throughout the early months of this season, you would know I have a problem with the way that the Yankees construct their lineup, especially recently since Giancarlo Stanton came back from the IL. They treat the lineup like it's some kind of merry-go-round. They treat it like we have these two groups of three, and we have so many great players that will decide on four of these six possible players to fit into those spots on any given night. They're living in a delusional land thinking they have so many great players when some of these guys have either come back down to earth, as in the case of Ben Rice after a hot start, or Trent Grisham, or maybe age catching up to him in the case of Paul Goldschmidt. But one thing I have lived and died on all year is I have not liked their handling of the outfield situation, especially right now with everybody healthy and available to play. And the worst handling that they have done is with the youngster Jason Dominguez, who was in the minors for most of last year as he was recovering from Tommy John surgery. But this year was supposed to be finally the year that he was given a chance to be the left fielder. And I know there were a lot of concerns coming out of spring training about his defense. But for the most part, other than that error he made in that hellacious seventh inning the other day against the Mets, Dominguez's defense, while is not Gold Glove caliber, is not going to make a lot of highlight reels, he's been useful. He has not been embarrassing the Yankees out in left field, and it should be given or allowed a chance to have a full crack out there without worrying every 2 days that he's going to be pulled out of the lineup for a career backup player in Trent Grisham. And how do you expect this kid to gain any confidence, gain any flow, if you keep jerking him around the way that you have recently, especially with what they did over the weekend, which was the tipping point of my aggravation? How he bats leadoff on Friday, has a fantastic game, hits 2 home runs, even amidst what was a blown game by the bullpen. But then on Saturday, you decide to drop him down to 6th in the lineup when there was still going to be a right-hander on the mound because, we've got to get Trent Grisham back in the leadoff spot. I know Trent Grisham had a great month of April, but that ended a long time ago. You look at his on-base and slugging percentage, it's gone down each month since then. Hell, since May 1st, he's batting .239 with an on-base of .340 and a slugging of only .410. Not exactly lighting up the world numbers. And he's been exactly what I've constantly brought up. Just like in his Padre days, when you turn the guy into an everyday regular player for you, he becomes a very meh offensive player. But that's not the only problems with the Yankees. A lot of these problems rely with the stubbornness of this regime. And when I say this regime, I mean two people. I mean General Manager Brian Cashman and, of course, his lapdog, the manager of the New York Yankees, Aaron Boone. Why in the world are we continuing this nonsense where you're playing Jazz Chisholm at third base with the corpse of DJ LeMahieu playing second? Quite frankly, the chair that I'm sitting in right now could give you the same amount of quality that you're getting out of second base from DJ LeMahieu. And over these last 22 games, he's been exposed offensively. He's got an on-base and a slugging percentage under 300. I understand they wanted to give the guy a chance because he has a contract still for at least another year and has won a batting title with this team, has been a leader and a good soldier. But the guy looks like a corpse out there. The guy looks like a lost player. Jazz, I give him a lot of credit for as immature as he can be. At times, he's not made a big deal over the defensive stuff, but he's clearly more comfortable at second base. So you've weakened yourself at two positions just to make a guy that is not an important part of this team, or at least shouldn't be an important part of this team, feel relevant, feel like he still has a place here, feel like he can still be a contributor when he has been anything but that. And you need to have your defense shored up. You need to have the best possible alignment you can have out there defensively right now when you consider there's a lot of issues with this pitching staff. The bullpen, unlike years past where the Yankees have been known to have really good to great bullpens, has been, if we're going to be fair about it, a weakness and a concern for this team, and something that they are going to have to look into before the trade deadline. Whether there's some prospect in the minor leagues that I'm not thinking of right now that they could maybe convert to a relief role. Maybe they get a starter at the trade deadline and turn Will Warren into a reliever for the rest of the year, since he'll probably have some innings concerns somewhere along the way. But their bullpen has an ERA this season over 4. That's 18th in the majors, and a whip of 1.3. Yes, Devin Williams struggled in the month of April, but since regaining the closer role has started to look like the Devin Williams that we expected him to be. But the concerns are the next 3 guys that you expected to be the guys that were going to be getting the ball to him. Luke Weaver, as great as he's been for the Yankees for almost a year and a half now, has been getting shelled since coming back off the IL. I don't know if he rushed coming back from the IL, if maybe having a couple of rehab appearances would have been better for him, or what's wrong with this guy right now. But he's getting bombed around, including in back-to-back games, giving up go-ahead home runs during a stretch where the Yankees really needed wins. The most recent, the 2-run bomb he gave up to McNeil on Friday afternoon. Jonathan Loaisiga has been very much hit or miss over his 20 appearances. He's a guy that I've always been a fan of, but has been creating a lot of messes and a lot of trouble on the base paths, not exactly having some of the control that we remember him having before his most recent arm issue. And what I'm really getting sick to death of when it comes to this bullpen is the shilling that goes on from the manager and from the broadcast booth of the Yes Network when it comes to Mark Leiter. Now, I don't expect a manager to go out there during post games and throw his player under the bus, talk about his player being utter trash. But when I'm watching these games and I constantly have to hear the likes of Michael Kay and David Cohn or John Flaherty or Paul O'Neill say that Mark Leiter is pitching in bad luck, I'm like, guys, get your heads on straight. Stop shilling for the franchise and call it out what it is. Mark Leiter Jr. sucks. His ERA is 4.5. His WHIP is 1.5. That's 150th in baseball right now. I don't give a damn what his BABIP is. I'm watching this guy get rocked around the ballpark. If he's not throwing strikes, what's good with that movement on the splitter? And now they have to rely on him more because you got Fernando Cruz out with another injury, and who knows when we're going to see him again. This bullpen needs to be shored up, and it becomes a bigger issue when you see the concerns what goes on with this rotation right now, as Rodon has not looked good in his last couple of starts, barely able to give them 5 innings in each of these starts. Max Fried, as great as he was to start the season, has started to level out a little bit and not been as inhumane as he was the first couple of months. You're likely going to have to rely on a rookie named Cam Schlittler coming up to the majors and making starts for them this week, as they've lost Clark Schmidt for the season due to Tommy John surgery. Will Warren's been a nice story at times, but he's still a rookie. And I just, quite frankly, don't trust Marcus Stroman. With this rotation not having a guy outside of Fried that can give you 7 innings a start, that bullpen becomes very important. And then there's becoming the very stubborn issue that it almost feels like the Yankees are running a child care center. It almost feels like the Yankees are running a preschool, because now we have another situation where they're afraid of hurting somebody's feelings, where they're enabling somebody to, quite frankly, be their teacher's pet, just to be a hindrance to this team. And of course, I'm talking about shortstop Anthony Volpe. I've never been one of those Yankee fans where I say constantly, oh, the Yankees have to have an all-star at this position, all-star at that position. Every position has to be filled with an all-star spot. Okay, what happened in 2009 with that team where you seemingly had rock stars at every position? They were referring to it as Murderer's Row and Cano. That kind of spot rarely ever occurs. It's like once in a lifetime you get a lineup where it so naturally comes along where you're able to fit in an all-star seemingly at every spot on the field. So I'm okay with every once in a while bringing up players from the minors and giving them a crack. Bypassing on a free agent class at a certain position. Wasn't exactly happy when they bypassed on Bryce Harper 8 years ago, but I was okay when the Yankees bypassed on the free agent shortstop class of 2022 that consisted of Trey Turner, who has been great for the Phillies, Carlos Correa, who we know has his injury concerns, Xander Bogaerts, who got an insane contract from the San Diego Padres, and then Dansby Swanson, who's always been a really good defensive shortstop, but it is only really starting to find his footing as a true offensive threat. The guy, if you want to complain about not going after him, was probably a year prior when Corey Seager was available, and he's been an all-star almost every year for the Rangers and was an integral part of them winning the World Series a couple of years ago. So I was okay with bypassing on those. But at the same time, Anthony Volpe, with all of the hype that was coming up from the minors, and maybe that was a lot of the internal hype machine from the Yankees, needed to live up to the goods, needed to be a solid, at least, contributor for them. And the problem with Volpe is we've never seen him get better. We've never seen him raise his game and take it to another level and grow as a player. We've seen plenty of guys where they grow from being a 21-year-old wide-eyed rookie to being a 24-year-old and show steadily improvement. I was not expecting him to be Derek Jeter, but I was also expecting something better than a career on-base percentage that is under 300 and a batting average that is my weight back in high school. It's bad enough that he's a guy that, I know he has 10 home runs, but you really don't view him as a home run threat. He's a guy that I think a lot of his power comes from the front row of Yankee Stadium and should be more of relying on trying to hit gap to gap and be a doubles guy rather than this uppercut swing that the Yankees keep teaching him or forcing upon him. But now it's become such a mess with him at shortstop. You realize since June 1st, he's batting a .184. Hell, in these last 23 games I'm talking about here, he's batting under 150. His on-base percentage is 230, and his slugging is 260. And to make it even worse, it's bad enough that he's a complete nothing offensively, but you expected him to at least still be good defensively. He's leading the American League in errors. So he has been such a mess and a problem at shortstop, and it's essentially become the face of the issues that we have here with the Yankees. But the issues run deeper than just him. The issues run deeper than just what's going on with the pitching staff right now. It goes all the way to the top, and that's the stubbornness of Cashman and Boone. And people can cry all they want, saying fire Boone, fire Boone, fire Boone. People, I've told you for a couple of years now, he's nothing but a puppet for Brian Cashman and the nerds. He's the figurehead that they put out there in front of the microphone because they're afraid to answer the questions. They're just wanting to stay behind closed doors, and they rely on him to be the guy that takes all of the bullets for them, that says all of the things that they don't want to answer for. So you can sit there and have a problem with Aaron Boone all you want. There are things that I really get on him a lot with the nonsense of, oh, it's right there in front of us, or how defensive he becomes when asked a question on television or radio interviews or podcasts or John Boy Media, any of that stuff. But the problem lies with the guy above him, the guy that's making the ultimate decisions, Brian Cashman. And he's never been forced to change his philosophies over the years because the Yankees have constantly had winning seasons. He's essentially treated as the fifth Steinbrenner child. And I don't know whether George, in his dying moments, told Hal that he has to keep Brian on as long as he wants to, or if it's going to take the Yankees having a losing season that finally forces him to change. None of this is going to change until Brian Cashman gets his head out of his ass and has a severe change in philosophy and has a growing of age moment and realizing that his shtick isn't working. Because the best that we've seen out of Aaron Judge, the evolution we've seen out of Aaron Judge to becoming one of the best players in baseball, is not because of the Yankees organization. He had to go to an outside the organization hitting coach to evolve as a player between 2016 and 2017. The Yankees' philosophy has ruined so many good, promising young players. And it's led to them being just good enough, but not getting over that hurdle that we all expect them to get above, and that's being a world champion. And until they have a coming-of-age moment and change their philosophy and realize what they're doing is not working, nothing is ever truly going to change. They'll keep having winning seasons, but they'll never truly be a championship team. All right, going to take my first break of the podcast here, but I got a lot left to talk about here today. The Knicks finally hired a head coach. There's a lot of movement going on in the Western Conference when it comes to some of these contenders, as well as another thing in baseball that quite frankly is really aggravating me. So a lot left to go here. Probably another 40 minutes or so you're going to deal with me. So as I tell you each and every single week at this time, please sit back, relax, help put your feet up if you feel like it, and continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
There's something else at Major League Baseball that is aggravating me to a level that I shouldn't be surprised about, but I sit here saying to myself, one time they can't just be bad. They can't just outright suck, because there is no organization in not just Major League Baseball, but all of professional sports right now. And that's a big thing to say. All of professional sports, no organization that deserves to have a bad year more than the Houston Astros. And that's an interesting statement to say when you consider that the team that has demonized my sports fanhood the most over my lifetime is the New England Patriots. But they've been very meh and haven't made the playoffs much since Tom Brady left. So they've kind of gotten their just desserts. They've kind of gotten what's coming to them finally. But the Houston Astros, it's amazing that they keep having players leave via free agency that were such a huge part of those championship teams. Those teams that, whether they were part of the World Series team in 2017 or going back to the World Series in 2019, or part of the team that won the World Series once again in 2022, no matter how many of these guys leave, whether it be George Springer, Carlos Correa, Garrett Cole, most recently Justin Verlander and Alex Bregman, they keep churning along and having good season after good season. I thought that with their slow start at 18-18, maybe this was finally going to be the year. Maybe this was finally going to be the year that the Houston Astros were going to be mid. But since May 8th, they've gone 36-17. They've lost just one series in that time. And over the weekend, they had an emphatic statement in beating down on the Los Angeles Dodgers, in which they swept the series, outscoring them 29-6, including during that series, Altuve going 6-for-11 with 3 home runs and 7 RBIs. So let me get this straight. I got a bad enough deal with last week George Springer treating the Yankees like batting practice and having bad memories from his time with the Astros, and now he's in the American League East as part of division rival Blue Jays. But Jose Altuve seemingly has no slowing down. The Astros seemingly have no slowing down. They've taken, in this time, a 7-game lead in the American League West and are on pace to qualify for the postseason for the 10th time in the last 11 years, as well as be on pace to win 98 games. Yeah, we all had that wrong. We were all, if you're not an Astro fan, hoping for that to come to an end, because with all of their nonsense in recent years, no one deserved to have a losing season more, and no one was more fortunate for the pandemic season to come along at the time that it did than the Astros, because I have truly believed that if the COVID-19 pandemic did not stop the baseball season, that Commissioner Rob Manfred was going to have to step in and stop the 2020 baseball season. Because you remember how much hatred, how much vitriol there was against the Astros at that time for what they did in the 2017 World Series and what they likely did in the 2019 postseason. There would have been an all-out war to the likes that we've never seen in the sports world. So they have been a very fortunate but very successful franchise for the last decade. Now let's take my attention off of that and talk about something more pleasant. And guess what, people? It finally happened. We've been criticizing them for weeks, and finally, the New York Knicks have a head coach. Yeah, guys, we knew it. We knew you could do it. You finally joined the rest of us and got your new head coach. That being Mike Brown, the veteran head coach who seems to be like a cat with 9 lives, seems to be that guy that will seemingly never go away. Mike Brown now is the head coach of the New York Knicks, his now 4th or 5th head coaching job in this league. I don't want to be disrespectful toward Mike Brown because he is a very credible head coach. He's a guy that has had a lot of success in this league. You look at his career record, 454 and 304. It's a well north of 500 winning percentage. He was the coach of the year with the Cavs in 2009. Once again, won it in 2023 with the Sacramento Kings when he led them to finally ending their long drought of not making the postseason before he foolishly got fired at the start of this year after a 13-18 start. And that's coming off of a summer in which he signed a contract extension. But this is a guy, like I said, winning record in his career, 2-time coach of the year, and he led the Cleveland Cavaliers to the NBA Finals in 2007, which was probably the most miraculous thing that we've ever seen when you consider you still had a very young LeBron James, only about 23 at the time, but was finally starting to show his promise and his greatness, and a team that lacked any real star power on it besides that. Yeah, they got swept by the Spurs in the finals, but just to get there was nothing short of a miracle. So this guy has some very good credentials, has a very good resume, has been well thought of by players around the league. I mean, you look at the players that he's coached, either as the head coach or an assistant. It's a who's who of the NBA over the last 20 years, being amongst the likes of Steph Curry, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, LeBron, Kobe, De'Aaron Fox, Klay Thompson. Some really great players. A lot of those either in the Hall of Fame already or are going to be in the Hall of Fame at some point later in their life. But it does feel a little bit like a runners-up trophy, should we say, because when you fired Tom Thibodeau, you thought that you were going to go for a glamour name. You thought that you were going to go for this big, sexy name out there. When you see a hire like this, as good a coach as he is, it almost comes off as you hired the best of what was remaining. When you take into consideration that you chased after 4 or 5 other teams' head coach that were already hired, they all said no to you interviewing their coach. You had an NBA championship level coach in Mike Malone sitting out there. Didn't give him a second interview. Mike Brown was the only person that got a second interview, and that interview included meeting with James Dolan. So it does feel like a little bit of your emotions, a little bit of your excitement has been sizzled here. And that's not to say that this can't work out. Sometimes the least sexy hires in the end turn out to be the best hires in the world. Like, no one was doing cartwheels back in 1996 when the Yankees hired Joe Torre. People were saying, what the hell are they doing? Hell, there was a New York tabloid that had their front page saying Clueless Joe at the time of that hire. And look what happened. They went on to win 4 of the next 5 World Series. Now, I'm not saying the Knicks are going to do that in the NBA, but they definitely have a shot. They definitely have a chance to do some exciting things here, because what Mike Brown will do, and this is not meant to be a shot at Tom Thibodeau, because Tom Thibodeau, I thought, did a really, really good job here, especially even before this year, considering some of the rosters he had. Mike Brown will at least try to establish his bench. He will not have this mindset of constantly going out there each night, having his starting 5 all play an average of 40 to 41 minutes a night and have their bench soaked dry. Especially now when you see an addition like the last week, adding Jordan Clarkson after his buyout in Utah. This is a guy that has been one of the best bench scorers in the league in recent years, and he's joining a team that logged the fewest bench minutes and had the fewest bench points in the league amongst reserve groups last year. So Mike Brown will do a better job in establishing those guys with Clarkson, with Deuce McBride, with some of the young kids that they've drafted. Hell, if they can keep Mitchell Robinson healthy and he can give them 20 minutes a night, I actually think you would be best starting Mitch and then having Hart come off the bench. That would give a little more sizzle to this bench group, and it would allow Towns to move over to the 4 position where he's clearly more comfortable. But this hire, yeah, it's not the big glamour hire that you were all expecting, but it should not be treated as a joke hire. Now, do I think that the Knicks at times during this process look foolish and look like they didn't have a plan? Yeah. But in the end, they come away with a really good coach, a guy that has had success in this league, and someone that I think Knicks fans should gravitate, not be disappointed that they have him now as their head coach.
I'll be back.
It feels like my Brooklyn Nets are becoming that team of the offseason, and not in a good way, should we say. There's always that team every offseason that is, I don't want to say treated as a doormat, but they're treated as that team that everyone looks at and says, all right, they're not ready to compete for anything, so we can look to them to be our salary dump team. We can look to them to be our 3rd or 4th team in a trade. And we've already seen this now on multiple occasions. You saw it a couple of weeks ago before the NBA draft. They were the 3rd team involved in the deal between the Celtics and the Hawks that sent Kristaps Porzingis to the Atlanta Hawks. Now, over the weekend, they were part of this historic 7-team trade that in the grand scheme of things, the main purpose was to send Kevin Durant to the Houston Rockets. And quite frankly, if you went through all of the details of this trade, it would make your head spin. So I'm not going to waste anybody's time with doing that. But over the last week, they were another example of salary dump, or should I say, they were in another position to be a salary dump receiver, as they made a trade with the Denver Nuggets to acquire Michael Porter Jr. and an unprotected first-round draft pick in 2032 for Cam Johnson. Cam Johnson, who had developed into a nice little player for this Nets team over the last couple of years. A guy that, yes, he's 2 years older than Michael Porter Jr., has 2 years remaining on his contract for $17 million less each of the next 2 years than what Michael Porter Jr. is set to make. And Michael Porter Jr. has always been an intriguing story. He's always been a guy in his 6-year career where you were waiting for him to take off. You knew that with the emergence of Jokic and Jamal Murray there, that he was never going to be the guy, but you expected it to turn into a big three situation for the Denver Nuggets, and it never matriculated in that way. Solid player, really good player for them at times, but never turned into that draft steal that people expected him to be when he was selected 14th overall 6 years ago. Now, the problem with Michael Porter Jr. has always been injury issues. And the reason why, as a Net fan, you shouldn't be getting so excited about getting a 27-year-old that has all-star potential is because not just with his contract, it's because he's had multiple back surgeries in his career, 3 already, and he's only 27. And he's currently recovering from an AC joint sprain that he suffered during the playoffs. He managed to play through it, but really was not effective much for the Denver Nuggets. So this is a guy that is always dealing with something, not along the lines of what Ben Simmons has done, where Ben Simmons just disappears and you never know where he is on the face of this earth. But he always seems to have some kind of an injury problem, even though he will try to play through it. That's part of the reason why Michael Porter Jr. has never developed into a great player. What I'm more so excited about here is that the Nets add another unprotected first-round draft pick to their stockpile of upcoming draft picks that they're going to have over the next 5 or 6 years. And hopefully somewhere along the line, either they get lucky and the ball bounces their way in the lottery, or one of these teams that they got draft picks from is bad and that draft pick becomes valuable for them to get fortunate to have a Cooper Flagg situation for them, or they can trade that and you have an unhappy in his prime superstar that is ready to come to the Brooklyn Nets that is not going to act like an imbecile or a child in the way that Kyrie Irving or Kevin Durant acted like. And at some point, before I turn 40 years old and before the calendar hits 2030, the Brooklyn Nets can be a competitive basketball team once again. It's always worth hoping for things, people. The sun comes up each and every single day. There's a new chance for something to happen. But in the case of the Denver Nuggets here, they have been very active this offseason so far. Not just with making this trade, but they fixed what was a problem for them in recent years. They had no bench. Ever since winning that championship, and this is the cost of being really good in the NBA under this CBA, it doesn't always allow you to keep your players that were very productive for you on championship teams. Because of the salary cap and you paying your stars, you're not able to hold on to guys that were important pieces of your bench, such as Bruce Brown, who was extremely effective for them in their 2023 championship run. Left for a good payday, playing the last couple of years with the Toronto Raptors and the New Orleans Pelicans. And now they're bringing him back as a free agent to be a useful role player and leader off that bench. Add in the fact that they were able to get out from under the Dario Saric contract, who that never worked out. He never saw time on the floor and was making $5.5 million to essentially sit around and chill. You add in a player like Tim Hardaway Jr. to that bench, who was a key contributor to the Pistons run last year, coming off the bench for them, and really developed his three-point shot in recent years, was a big reason why they jumped from being a 14-win team to a 44-win team. The one confusing thing for them is they made the trade for Dario Saric to get out from under his contract, and they thought they were acquiring Jonas Valanciunas in return. Instead, you've got this weird scenario where Jonas Valanciunas is trying to get out from his deal in the NBA and go to Greece, where he reportedly has a 3-year deal for about $13 million waiting for him there. He's already played enough years in the NBA where he'll reach full league pension when he retires, and has made it clear through his representation he does not want to play in Denver. But the Denver Nuggets have told him, we're not letting you out from your contract. You're going to play for us, or you're going to play for nobody. So it's a really weird spot for them, especially when you consider Valanciunas could be a valuable piece for them. This is a guy that averaged 10 points and 7 rebounds last year between the Kings and Wizards. Yes, he's making about $10 million this coming year, but he provides a very useful, very successful big man to come off the bench and kind of ease down the minutes on Jokic, because the problem with the Nuggets last year is they were almost like the New York Knicks of the Western Conference, where they didn't have a lot of options to turn to off the bench. They were essentially running a 6-man team, and not because the head coach wanted to do it that way. It's because he had no one else to turn to. He had no backup big men. DeAndre Jordan is essentially there to hang out as the team dad. No one off that bench provided any real relief for them, any time for their starters to get even the slightest amount of burn, the slightest amount of time off. So this is going to be something to really watch for, and something that I'm sure the Nuggets and their fans are hoping turns out in their favor. Because you look at the arms race that is going on out in the Western Conference. As we know, the West had the NBA champions from this past year with the Oklahoma City Thunder. And they're not going anywhere anytime soon. You saw the contract extension that SGA just signed, and I'm sure over the next couple of years they're going to give their other young stars some big money deals, along with all of the first-round draft picks they have coming their way over the next decade. The Mavericks just got Cooper Flagg, and even though they're going to be without Kyrie Irving for probably the first 2-3 months of the season, I think that we're not going to see him until late January at the earliest, you signed a useful point guard in D'Angelo Russell to be the starter there, at least until Kyrie comes back, and then you've got a guy that can join that bench and lengthen that team a little bit when Kyrie does come back. That is, if he is the point guard and Jason Kidd doesn't stick to this plan of potentially running Cooper Flagg as the point guard. And on top of that, the movement that the Rockets have made so far this offseason, beyond just making the trade for Kevin Durant, and beyond just the contract extension that they gave Jabari Smith Jr. last week. They were able to bring back Clint Capella on a 3-year deal to be a big man off the bench, and add Dorian Finney-Smith, a 3-and-D guy and a very successful defensive player in this league. So you've got an arms race going on out there in the Western Conference right now between the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Rockets, and the Mavericks. And notice there, I didn't mention any of the LA teams, didn't mention the Golden State Warriors, who are starting to get up there in age. These teams, they see an opening there now, and they see how they're all trying to jockey for position in what could be a very, very fun, tightly contested Western Conference going into next season.
I'll be back.
SGA is not the only young star in this league that is getting paid big bucks so far this offseason. What SGA got is mind-blowing. 4 years for $285 million. Not only is the richest annual salary for a player in the NBA, it's the richest annual salary for a player in all of North American professional sports. But it's well-deserved when you see what he's done this year. League MVP, Finals MVP, scoring title. Only 3 other players have done that in the history of this league. So it's very much well-deserved. And with how young he is, you don't expect him to slow down anytime soon. But you also saw the Memphis Grizzlies lock up Jaren Jackson Jr. to a 5-year, $240 million contract extension, something that we long expected to happen, especially after the trade of Desmond Bane a couple of weeks ago, how this franchise is going to be built around Jaren Jackson Jr. and Ja Morant moving forward. The key for them is how they build the team around them, and if they can get players that want to go to Memphis, that want to play in a town that's not the most glamour town. I'm not going to call Memphis, Tennessee a small market by any means, but it's not, New York, Boston, LA, even a place like Miami. So they've got some work to do there, but it takes away an option that I'm sure teams were hoping for, that had their eyes on potentially him either becoming a free agent at the end of next season, or if Memphis was bad, possibly pushing chips to the head of the table and trying to trade for him. Something I'm sure Laker fans were probably getting their hopes up for, as they've not done a lot to really change their chances going into next season. And when you look at the Lakers on paper, it feels like the Lakers are more so building for the future beyond 2025, 2026. They're viewing this as a year where, we're going to be competitive, but we want to reset the market, reset our payroll, as they have a chance next year to potentially have at least one max salary cap space open to them in free agency, where they could either go trade for a player that is unhappy in their situation, or get a big star that potentially reaches the market to pair up with Luka Doncic. See, it's no longer about making LeBron James happy or doing what fulfills his needs so much so as building for a long term around Luka. And they've done that somewhat here in the last week with adding some less sexy names but useful players, guys that have some size to them in Jackson Hayes and DeAndre Ayton, who has never quite lived up to being the first overall pick in the draft of 2018, but has been a good player. You look at, he's averaged at least 10 points, 10 rebounds in each of his first 7 seasons in the league. No one had done that since Dwight Howard, and is amongst the select company that's averaged at least 10 points, 10 rebounds each of the past 7 seasons, going along with Giannis, Rudy Gobert, and Nikola Vucevic. So this guy is a good player, but maybe pairing him up with Luka will get the best out of him. But I don't look at the Lakers as saying their chances increased today. Essentially, they settled for what was left on the free agent market at big man after Capella went to the Rockets and after Brook Lopez signed with the Los Angeles Clippers. The Lakers were just hoping to get someone useful to kind of strengthen out that depth, even as solid as Jackson Hayes was for them last year, so that they could at least remain interesting going into next season. I know Laker fans can be probably the most snobby fans in the NBA when it comes to always expecting big things. You know, that they're right there along the realm of how Cowboy fans are in the NFL, or how Yankee fans can be at times, at least the young Yankee fans can be in Major League Baseball. But they shouldn't be the fan base that is the most disappointed today. If there's any fan base that should be disappointed the most today, it's the Indiana Pacer fans. Because here you are coming off of a year in which you went to the NBA Finals. You were one game away from winning your first NBA championship in franchise history. Now you had a heartbreaking moment in Game 7 with losing Tyrese Halliburton for likely all of next year due to a torn Achilles. But you said to yourselves, all right, we're in a good spot here going into next year, even without Halliburton. Who knows what the Celtics are going to be like next year. If we can get Halliburton back by the playoffs, we've always been that demon that haunts the New York Knicks, or at least this iteration of the New York Knicks. We could still be a challenger. And that was assuming you were going to have all of your guys back. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen for you, as the Milwaukee Bucks decided to pull a fast one here and waive Damian Lillard, stretching his contract over a 5-year span rather than the 2 years he had remaining, in order to create salary cap space to sign Myles Turner. Now, the signing of Myles Turner, I don't think makes the Milwaukee Bucks any form of a contender, because you look at things, it's not like they stacked players on top of Giannis here. You still have a lot of question marks on this team in signing the likes of Jericho Sims, trading Pat Connaughton, signing Gary Harris. You don't have that true number 2 guy for Giannis, something that Myles Turner, as good a player as he is, has never really been. He's been more of a good defensive player that's capable of spacing the floor. Last year was his best year as far as offense is concerned, but he's been mostly known as a defensive stopper over the course of his career. And I'm not always the biggest fan of having a defensive big man who the only thing he can do is jack up a lot of threes offensively. So I don't think that move increases the Bucks' chance in the East, especially when you look around the East, you see the Knicks, you see the Cavaliers. Boston still needs to be treated as a legitimate threat with Jaylen Brown there. We know that teams like the Magic and the Pistons are on the come up. So we know those teams are there. Those teams are viable threats. But if you're a Pacer fan, you thought you were going to be amongst those viable threats, bringing essentially the same squad back, just not having Tyrese Halliburton in the mix, at least until possibly playoff time. So that has got to be a disappointing moment for Pacer fans coming off the high of being in your first finals in 25 years, seeing a team that has become essentially your rival steal away a franchise player from the last decade. But if you're a team like the Cavs and the Knicks, now's the time to strike. You look at it, next year the Eastern Conference can be yours. With these young teams not ready to jump up and truly compete with you just yet, with Boston potentially taking a step back, not having Jason Tatum, it's right there in front of both the Knicks and the Cavaliers to go get the job done, come out of the Eastern Conference, and potentially win a championship. Something that the Cavaliers have done once in the last decade and that the Knicks have not done in over 50 years. No pressure on you, either Kenny Atkinson or Mike Brown. But next year is up for yours to grab hold and truly seize control of. And that, my friends, was Keeping It Sports with M3 for Monday, July 7th, 2025. Everyone, please have a great night. Have a fun, safe, happy, healthy week. We got one life, people, so you might as well try to live it up the best that you can. And I'll talk to you guys again, hopefully at the same time next week. Until then, peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody. I have had enough of you. Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will you?
I don't want to see you, I don't want to hear you, and I don't want to smell you. Now leave. I'll be back.